All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Ethan Evans. We are here to take you through the top 3 product management insights from our combined companies. I'll have Rohan introduce himself in just a second. So briefly, if you don't know me, I just said I'm from Amazon. I am an engineer by training. I spent 12 years in startups, so I also have startup experience. 15 years at Amazon. I left 5 years ago after building things like Prime Video and working for Twitch. And I now coach and teach. Rohan, your stage.
Hey folks, my name's Rohan. I've spent about a dozen years in product. I started my career at Amazon and Microsoft, and in the more recent past, I've been at Stripe, and I'm currently at Airbnb, where I lead payouts processing, which essentially has to do with moving money around the world. Outside of my day job, I also spend a lot of time writing, mentoring, and coaching, and I think a lot of folks on the list that I'm seeing at some point have probably interacted with at least some of you. So nice to see a lot of people on here today.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to jump right into it so that we have time to answer your questions at the end. And we will stay a bit beyond the half hour to take the top questions from the Q&A tool. We usually do that by voting. And so please enter your questions and vote on them, because with so many people here, we want to make sure to prioritize the most important questions. If you don't know how to do that, my Chief Operating Officer, Jason, will be putting instructions in chat to make that easy. So with that said, starting with Amazon, our first insight we would share is customer obsession or customer engagement, user engagement. So one of the reasons I partnered with Rohan on this, as A, he was at Amazon and then went to Stripe and Airbnb, but also B, Stripe and Airbnb have derived or extended some of what Amazon did. And so there's a common thread of these 3 major companies about how they approach great product management. So of course, everyone knows pay attention to customers, but what does that really mean? Well, first, Amazon was founded on the idea of being Earth's most customer-centric company. That's actually something Jeff Bezos spoke about routinely. And he put in place what was called a leadership principle of customer obsession. Okay, but what does it mean to be obsessed about customers? He specifically contrasted it with being obsessed about competitors. Some companies focus a lot on what their competitors are doing. Jeff put forward the theory and led everyone internal to Amazon with the thought that if we focused on the customers, the competition could do whatever it wanted, and we would take care of ourselves. And so how I remember this playing out is customers would launch something or add a feature, and of course we would notice and pay attention, but we never let chasing a competitor distract us from what we believed was the right thing for the customer. There were a couple of what we call mechanisms for that. How did we implement that? Well, one of them was called the working backwards document. So the idea here, the main thesis, was start with what the customer wants. The customer wants very fast shipping. The customer wants to have the product as soon as they decide they want it. And then you work backwards in that example and say, okay, what can we do to make shipping faster? And you would work all the way backwards, as opposed to starting with a question like, how can we sell more? Or starting with a question like, how can we use this technology? We would start from what is the customer benefit. The main piece of the working backwards document was called the PRFAQ, press release and frequently asked questions. The actual concept there was we would write a document that simply described how we would announce the product, like what would we actually tell customers about it. And that was a way of making sure we were framing our thinking in terms of customer benefits as opposed to in terms of internal goals. So that's where Amazon began. It worked really well. A little bit later, I'll talk about a book you can use if you're interested in learning more about that methodology. But Rohan, tell us where Stripe and Airbnb extended this methodology.
No, absolutely. Thanks for covering that, Ethan. So I think, like you pointed out, Stripe especially derived a lot from the sort of Amazon way of doing things, especially when it came to customer obsession. And I think we kind of took it a little bit to the extreme in the sense, especially on the product team side. Speaking to customers was literally a part of the life force of the company. And this involves a lot of small mechanisms and nuances of what that looks like. So you have your standard sort of UXR sessions, but every single product manager at Stripe would spend time talking to customers every single week. So if it's a large set of, if it's our large users, we would usually have them on Slack channels or literally have some of them on speed dial, and we'd be talking to them all the time. For the broader populace, we'd be on Reddit, we'd be on Twitter, we'd be on a bunch of social platforms talking to a lot of our users. And for Stripe, primary users are developers. So these are the platforms where they do spend a lot of time on. Additionally, I think there was a very interesting part of Stripe culture for product managers and just product teams where we'd be trained on what customer conversations should look like. And a couple of things that I've seen at other companies where they're not necessarily done as sort of well as they did it at Stripe is that a customer conversation should not be about your product. It should not be a sales pitch. And Stripe specifically trained us to listen to what the customer has to actually say and focus on the problem and on the pain point. So a lot of times when I would be speaking with my customers and my users at Stripe, a lot of times it would be them sharing their screen and walking me through what their problem is, what their pain point is. And in the 30, 45 minutes we'd talk, not once would we actually talk about the product or the solution. So it was very, very focused on the problem that we're trying to solve for the customer and really understanding that. And another really cool thing that leadership did, and John and Patrick, who are the founders at Stripe, would do this, is every Friday we had a fireside chat with our senior leadership, and they would invite users to come in to this fireside chat every Friday and basically have a sort of candid conversation about their experience with the product or the pain points. And the entire company would kind of watch and learn from this. So it would be like 15 to 20 minutes every Friday at the fireside. And this was like an exercise in radical candor where they were encouraged to be extremely open, extremely transparent. And it ranged from literally small mom and pop shops and startups that are just kind of getting off the ground all the way up to the big, large enterprises that everyone is aware of. So we actually got to see every single week what the right way of doing this is. And they kind of set this example for the whole company.
I love that story because what I find so often with product managers and with myself is a bias to think we understand the problem and to want to just roll our eyes up in our heads and think, and realizing that it's pretty easy to get a few customers on the phone or on a video conference. Passionate customers want to tell you about their experience with your product for sure. So I'll move us on. We have a shared slide of takeaway lessons. One thing we want to do here today is really give you actionable things you can go do. And I think my first lesson would be just actually do talk to customers, make it a habit. So with that in mind, how to get to writing-centric. Sorry. So force yourself to just do it. Make it a routine habit to join calls, read reviews. There are many mechanisms. I had one product manager who read every customer review of an Amazon product, and that as they came in, but it meant he spent a few minutes every day reading the reviews, which eventually piled up into the thousands. And you can imagine the insights he had from over time having read thousands of reviews. Of course, today you would take those same reviews, feed them into your favorite AI and ask it for consistent themes. So that would be an easier job perhaps, but he read them all. What would you add here, Rohan?
Definitely the last part of it is where you need to listen and ask questions more than talking. And this was something we did a lot at Stripe and at Airbnb. An interesting thing being a consumer company in the travel industry is you actually get to go and experience a lot of the pain points that users are talking about, whether it's your guests or your hosts. So that becomes a really, really cool way of getting user feedback, where you're not just relying on sort of formal settings or interviews or sort of social media posts, but pretty much everyone in like at the company, at Airbnb, has travel as a part of their DNA. And you're going and you're staying at Airbnbs, you're talking to your host, you're talking to other guests, you're talking to experience providers. And that is a very, very good way of actively, constantly being in touch with what's happening with your users, what's happening in the market. So I think just constantly being aware of what is happening with your users, listening to them, having a pulse on things is extremely, extremely important as a product manager.
And I am watching the questions people are asking. One person asked, I'll just answer it now because it's in this context. How do you get your customers to talk to you every week? So both Rohan and I are familiar with and used to working on products that have millions of customers. So we're not talking necessarily to the same customer every week. If you work in a context where you have only a few very large customers, say enterprise software, and you work with a few banks or government agencies, you may have to structure this differently and have less sort of nagging contact and more maybe formal feedback sessions. If you have 1 million customers, you simply need to open the door and have a way for them to walk through, and they will pour through. Some number of them will. You do have to be aware there that you are getting a biased sample, that you're getting the people who care enough to bother. And you may want to reach out to some people who aren't proactive. But in any case, there are, I would answer that question in the end to say, put in some effort, and I think your customers want to talk to you. By the way, if they don't, they're either very happy or pretty unhappy. So you want to figure out really quickly, are they not talking to you because they literally have no complaints, or because they're looking for another solution? Okay, so our second insight is these companies have all built a writing-centric culture. They use writing to reduce, to bring thought down to where it can be shared, passed around, and discussed. So Amazon made a clear flip from PowerPoint to written narratives in about 2004. This is documented in a book actually by one of my former vice presidents, Bill Carr, called Working Backwards. So if you want to know more about how Amazon made this change, how to replicate it, how to use it, it's all in a great book that's now in something like 30 languages. But the second thing Amazon did, so why they move away from PowerPoint? Well, actually, the explanation is hidden in the name. PowerPoint was a sales tool. It was about making powerful points. And as opposed to fostering discussion, it became a one-way mechanism for the PM or someone else to try and tell everyone their thoughts. And at least in Amazon, the idea was we wanted to have deep discussion with lots of details, not argument about a few words on a screen. At the same time, people would then write forever, 40-page doc, 50-page doc. You're not trying to bring all that detail. The documents are limited to 6 pages as a way of crunching down and forcing the writer to really summarize and get to the key points with some supporting detail. That 6-pager forces clarity. It's often harder to write a good tweet than to write a good page. Finally, all the leaders at Amazon, those were called level 7 and up, are given a writing exercise as a part of their interview. And you'll see this in Rohan's slide that comes next. But everyone was tested after a while. It wasn't in the very beginning. But we started hiring only people who could write well enough to do the job. And that's because it was so essential to the culture. So, Rohan.
Yeah, so this one is something which, at least at Stripe, it's a very, very inherent part of the Stripe culture. A lot of people who are familiar with Stripe as a company know that one of the first things people talk about is the API docs when you think of Stripe. And that's interestingly the thing that they're known for pretty much across the community. And that's a very, very deeply ingrained part of what it is to work at Stripe. And every single thing at Stripe gets documented. So whether it's a 15-minute meeting, it's a big strategy, whether it is a product requirement, whether it is sort of a set of notes on different discussions that you've had, even if it's brainstorming, all of it sort of gets documented. But there is a high bar on documentation. It's not just a whole bunch of words written out to a 40-pager like Ethan was talking about. You have to be extremely succinct in what you're writing. The points need to come across very crisp and clear. And this is across all roles. This is not just a product manager thing, even though PMs do a lot of the heavy writing. And one of the reasons that PMs are responsible for this is at Stripe, all blogs and release notes and public facing documentation are written by the product managers. API documents are written by the engineers and the product managers. So all roles do require a lot of writing exercise. And it really does force you to think very, very clearly and bring in sort of crispness into not just your thought, but in the way you're effectively communicating those thoughts to your users. And as a part of our interview process, regardless of what level you're coming in for at the product manager discipline, there is an evaluation round that is specifically focused on writing at Stripe. And Airbnb has a sort of mixed mode, I would say, because it's such a design first company. We still do use a lot of slides, especially to convey the visual aspects. But behind those slides, behind what those actual visuals look like, behind what the user experience looks like, being a consumer app, there is still a very, very powerful writing culture, even at Airbnb, where, again, you writing your requirement documents is something that has to be extremely crisp and succinct. And it kind of takes you away from being hand wavy about things. It forces you to be detailed. It forces you to really think of a lot of edge cases and corner cases, which often get overlooked. And it's something I hear a lot when I mentor outside as well, where people are like, well, we don't really write things a lot. We rely on slides. And inevitably at every launch, you end up with a lot of edge cases that did not get covered because that thought exercise did not take you as deep. And slides kind of tend to focus on the happy path, and it doesn't force you to think about potential things that can go wrong.
Yeah, so Rohan, we'll talk about this maybe a little bit on the next slide, but I just want to prompt you to think about when you speak. A common question I get is, how can I be a great writer when English is my second or third language? And so we're going to talk next about writing tips and how to get good at this. Maybe speak to that. So from my perspective, I am a classic engineer. I hated English. I did my best to take AP classes and test out of it. The result is I never took a single college level class because I managed to test out of them. And that was probably a mistake. I ended up getting good at writing and learning to love writing, which is what I do now, by doing it a lot. And in my case, my career was in an email generation. And I looked at the stats. I was writing about 40 emails a day. Some of them, of course, were very short, like you would write, oh, yes, okay, great, do that, no. But a lot of them had depth, and I got really good at it. And it's a matter of repetition. 10,000 emails roughly per year, let's just say a 20-year career is 200,000 attempts at writing and getting my thoughts across in writing to larger and larger audiences. So practice makes perfect. Now I write on LinkedIn every day. So again, it's business days, 250 posts a year. At this point, I've written well over 1,000 LinkedIn posts. That's another practice mechanism. I write a newsletter, so hundreds of newsletters now. You write a lot. So Rohan, make your point, but also talk a little about, if you don't mind, English as a second language.
Absolutely. And Ethan, I think that's such a core point, where practice makes perfect, and everybody starts writing in a stumbling fashion. And as you kind of iterate and you get better at it, you get feedback, you see what resonates, what doesn't resonate with the set of audience that you're looking for. Kind of fine-tuning that really, really kind of helps you get crisp. For me, I've found that I've always been a voracious reader, and I really, really like reading, and especially books are sort of my poison of choice. I'm not as much into short form content when it comes to reading. I prefer reading books over blogs, for example. But I think input does matter, and your quality of output depends on your quality of input. So the more you read, you kind of start realizing what kind of styles resonate with you, what kind of content and what kind of material and presentation of information aligns with your thought process, and that does help the way you write. I feel also for those for whom English is not their first language, reading definitely helps you kind of amp up your vocabulary. It kind of helps you broaden your communication repertoire, if you will. And the second point is what I'm seeing specifically in the chat. I see at least 100 people who have commented in the last 3 minutes saying that writing is going to be obsolete because AI tools are going to do all your writing for you. And I do want to take a second to address that. AI tools will help you structure your words. They will help you kind of format things in a way that become consumable. They will not necessarily be able to think for you. And good writing is about 80% thought clarity and 20% the actual words you put on paper. So the 20% of the words that get put on paper is something that a lot of tooling will help you with. But you really do need thought clarity if you want to have good writing. And that is the part that you actually need to spend a lot of time focused on. I do see a lot of people just saying AI will solve this, but it's going to solve the 20%. You still have to do the thinking part of what you write down.
Yeah, and the point that Bezos made and others is that you can't write clearly if you can't think clearly. The writing was a forcing function. So the more you rely on AI, the more it can produce something that seems good enough and makes you lazy in your thinking. So until we have real general AI that will actually think as opposed to being a stochastic model that predicts wording, you're not going to get good thinking from it. And you put me to shame here. I probably read about 20 books a year and thought I was doing pretty well. So killer. All right. So our third point is single-threaded teams, focused, holistic teams that bring together all the resources. So Amazon implemented a pretty interesting model where, as much as possible, they tried to construct small teams that owned a single goal and that had all the resources on the team they needed. One model they used was called a 2PT or 2-pizza team. The idea being the team should be small enough to be fed by 2 pizzas. So it would be something like a manager, 6 or so developers, a PM, maybe a technical program manager, maybe a designer, might become 3 pizzas. But the idea was that small unit. And then even when you need to scale up, even at the vice president level, they would try to have a vice president focus on one goal. So when I was an Amazon vice president, I owned, for example, the Amazon App Store, and I had 800 people, but only one product. I was only supposed to make Amazon's App Store better, more competitive, more complete. And I had all the different types of people, all the different specialties to be able to do that. Many of you work in environments that aren't like this. So we're going to talk to you about how you can simulate it. But if you have the chance, or if you're looking at a new company, find out their team structure, because being able to have everyone focused on one goal and feeling ownership of that product goal is very different than borrowing little pieces of time from people who are working on 10 projects. And frankly, your project is just one of theirs, and they have the luxury of saying, well, we all do this. If that one fails, I have 9 others that will succeed, or 6 of my 9 others, and I'm still going to get a passing grade on my life and my job because I'm doing good work on all this other stuff. You do not want to be in that situation. So, Rohan.
This is the one part which I think Amazon did quite uniquely, where they actually had specifically single-threaded sort of leadership. And that meant that multi-disciplines kind of leveled up into a single leader. Ethan, I think we're one slide ahead. Can you go back one?
Oh, are we? I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Let me move that back. There we go. I blew it.
That's all right. Thanks. So it's a little different at Stripe and Airbnb, where the actual reporting structure isn't necessarily single-threaded. But to Ethan's earlier point, we found ways to actually simulate what that looks like. So our product teams are going to be our product managers, our engineers, our designs, and our cross-functional stakeholders who are all working towards that shared objective. So even if you're, and this is true at a large majority of the companies, I think Amazon is an exception when it comes to a single-threaded reporting structure as well. But a large majority of companies do still have siloed orgs. What really works in those kind of environments, though, is you have very, very clear roles and responsibilities, have extremely clear accountability, and you have your set of focus teams. So, for example, at Airbnb right now, I mentioned that I work on processing payouts and primarily on money movement. And my core team is not a set of people who all report into the same manager, but it's myself, it's my engineers, it's my designers, it's people on finance, it's people on treasury. It's a bunch of different cross-functional folks who are all kind of cordoned off, if you will, or ring-fenced, if you will, and focus on the goal of making payouts successful at Airbnb. So regardless of what else is going on, we still kind of have that sort of bubble around us that this is the primary thing that we're going to focus on. And this is where 80-85% of our time is going to go. And it kind of gets interesting in this model because depending on who your end user is, your focus is going to change a little bit. So at Stripe, for example, our primary users are developers. So it's a very, very heavily engineering focused approach. At Airbnb, it's a consumer app. Guests and hosts are sort of the primary users, and user experience is king. So UX becomes a very, very strong focal point, and the rest of sort of that product team gets built around that singular focus. So that's an interesting way of kind of balancing it out, even if your organizational reporting structure doesn't necessarily appear to be single-threaded on the surface.
Okay. And I think I'm going to let you mostly speak to the slide I wrongly showed, because it's the question of how do you do this? Amazon has, as you said, a unique cheat code where we actually organize this way.
Yeah. And if you can't, which I can already see in the chat a couple of questions coming in, well, how do I actually do this? So given that we're primarily talking to product folks on this call, if you are a product manager, you need to firstly be sure that you are taking full accountability. You keep hearing things like influence without authority. You need to really, really practice that and be the one person who takes entire accountability for your product or your feature or whatever domain that you actually own. And if you are a leader on the product side, design a product-centric org. One of the biggest mistakes that I keep seeing in products that don't succeed are that the org chart gets shipped and whatever internal structures you have get reflected in the final product that makes it out to the user. Do not do that. Primarily focus on designing your org in a way where your product is at the center of all of it, not the jobs, not the roles, not the disciplines, not the functions. What goes out to your user should be like a fully cohesive product at the end of all of it. Your internal org structure is irrelevant to your end user.
Yeah, and since both Rohan and I worked in Amazon, I saw somebody comment that the cheat code is Amazon having a lot of money. That's actually not true. And that Amazon adopted this when they were still unprofitable. This is how they got a lot of money. And so it's always easy to blame money and to miss the innovation that companies are using to get that money. So I would just challenge and say, Amazon was willing to invest in this level of focus as a secret weapon, and that's from back before the company turned consistently profitable. Amazon now does have a lot of money thanks to AWS, but in a retail business, they were a thin margin running in the red venture or debt-backed company, even once they were public. So we're going to summarize, and then a comment I just made, we're going to take a few questions from the Q&A list. It always amazes me. There are 550 of you listening to the sultry sound of my voice, and no question has more than 6 votes. So you can easily sway what we address, but you have to actually open the Q&A tool. Otherwise, the person with 6 votes will get our attention. So if that's what you want, great. If not, it's your chance to be heard. So with that, Let's see the slide. There we go. So just a quick summary, literally just reviewing what we've said. I saw a question go by that said, what are the top 2 things we should go do? Well, I would pick actions from those 3 action slides on one of these product tips. How are you going to engage your users? You can ask yourself, what are you actually going to do? If you have 3 days left in this week, what are you going to do to engage a real customer or user? And is that a consistent process? Second, are you writing? Are you putting your thoughts in writing? The holistic product teams is a little trickier to work on. If you have it, great, use it. If you don't, you can start thinking about or acting on what would you do to try to get resources, to try to pull resources, to try to organize and motivate the team to think holistically about your product, and as Rohan said, not to ship your org chart. Rohan, anything you would add in summary?
I think the main one is go and actually put some of this into practice. A lot of times it's easy to listen to things on webinars and read about them in blogs and conceptualize them hypothetically. And then you kind of put off actually putting it into practice because you don't know the perfect and ideal way to go execute it. Don't try and wait for the perfect way of executing it. Go and do it incrementally, try it out, figure out what works for your scenarios. It's going to be a little different for each and every one of us, and every single career is going to look a little different. Don't wait for the perfect moment to start. Just go start executing some of these things, implement them, iterate, get better at it over time. It doesn't have to be perfect on day one.
All right, very good. Okay, so we're going to jump to questions here in just a second. I'll stop the screen share, but Jason has put Rohan's LinkedIn link so you can find him in chat. We put it there a few times. We want to connect with him. I see some people asking to connect with me. I connect with as many people as I can. I'm actually up against, it's a LinkedIn product feedback. I'm up against their connection limit. So you can follow me, but they actually limit how many people I can connect to. I teach a class. If you're interested, it's my signature class. It's about being stuck in your career. It says stuck at senior manager. It's been taken by product managers, many different ICs. It's literally about, if you feel that you have hit a wall in your career, how do you break through and move up? And of course, there's lots of places you can find me. My website, ethanevans.com, but that's also already been put in the chat. So with that, I'm going to stop the share so that we can all see each other, or at least we can see you without the slides in the way. You can see us. And then I can't help but jumped on this first question. When I prompted you all for questions, 30 of you did a good job. One question surged to the top, and that question is, what's your take on AI and product management future? Some are predicting a PM career would be irrelevant soon. Rohan, I'll let you take that first, but I have strong opinions about this.
Absolutely. I have very strong opinions about this as well. So I actually I very, very strongly disagree with PM careers will be irrelevant soon and that AI is going to take over any of the jobs. I think it's an interesting narrative on AI taking over jobs rather than AI assisting jobs. So I heavily use large language models and a bunch of additional AI tools in my day-to-day job. Like I have pro subscriptions for a bunch of different ones, and every single one of them are extremely helpful as a tool. But what you need to remember is that it is a tool. It is not going to think for you. It's similar to what we talked about when it comes to writing, where it can help you structure things a certain way. It can help you execute things a certain way. It cannot do your thinking for you, at least not today. Someday in the future, in the world of AGI, maybe. But today, unless you are really able to bring your thoughts and your insights in, AI is not going to do that bit for you. And I think that's the most important job that a product manager does at any role. When you're working on a product, when you're working on a feature, being able to understand your domain, being able to have that expertise, being able to understand what the true pain points of your users are, because a user is always going to tell you that their pain point is X, and then you need to peel the onion 6 layers to find out that their actual true pain point is Y. So being able to distill it down to that, understand what is the actual issue that you're trying to solve, then come up with a creative solution for that issue in a way that also differentiates you from your competitors. All of that involves a lot of thinking. And the thinking part of it is not something that a large language model is going to do for you. So I think those tools are going to be helpful. It's going to make your market research easier. It's going to make building prototypes easier. It's going to help you do tasks. It's not going to help you do the thinking part of it. That's my take on kind of where you can use AI tools to kind of supplement your role, but it's not really going to take over the role. Jason, I'm sorry, Ethan, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so my main thought is actually first, I see more people wanting to be PMs now or wanting to understand product because as engineering productivity goes up, assisted by coding tools, you can create more product faster, which means you need more people making product decisions. The other thing AI definitely doesn't do right now is organize the team and set up all the dependencies, the shipment schedules, the integration, the launch plan, all the things a product manager does. You know, you were talking about how at Stripe they write the documents. Sure, AI can help with even the writing, but the product manager is actually necessary to clear the road. I have an image I use, which is of a very fast car, a sports car caught in a traffic jam. The engineer is now the sports car who maybe can write code really fast, but they can't go anywhere if the PM is not clearing the track. Second, and this is also important, just making, as an engineer, just making me faster may make me more destructive. In other words, I can build useless crap just as quickly as I can build things that resonate with customers. And so again, the product judgment piece I think is critical. So I actually think PMs are in a stronger position than at least low-level programmers at this point. So of course that might change. Okay, next question though, I also like quite a bit, and that's, hi, product manager from Toronto here with a business and finance background. Would love to get your take on how product managers with non-technical backgrounds can grow and succeed. I think this is a good question because I'll take this one first a little bit, Rohan, and then let you weigh in. It's important, obviously, that you be able to discuss technology competently, to understand and have a respectful interchange with with engineers. But I've seen many people with English majors, only business degrees, MBAs, things like that, be successful product managers because the main function of product management is not technical design. And if you're actually getting too deep into that, you're really overstepping your lane because engineers want, the classic is tell me what you need, tell me what the customer needs, don't tell me what to build. And I see you nodding, Rohan, so I'll let you pick it up right there.
No, absolutely. That's 100%. I think from an engineering perspective, it's always tell me what you need done. Don't tell me how I should do it. Let me figure out the how part of it. I think to Soumya's question, the part I did want to address is when we talk about technical background and non-technical background, somehow I've seen that word background always get restricted to what your actual educational degree was. And I don't think it's relevant in today's world. For example, I have absolutely no background in moving money and payments because I did not study it in college, but that's the domain I've been working in for the last 6 years of my career. And I am a deep, deep expert when it comes to moving money around the world today, because it is a domain that I have gone and learned and gone extremely deep in over that time. So I don't think your background should limit what you can do. The entire world is at your fingertips today. If there are domains that you're going to go work on, you can absolutely go learn them. And what you did in college X number of years ago should not dictate what you want to do in your career tomorrow. So I don't think that you are really constrained by the technical or non-technical aspect of a particular background. It's just another thing that you can go and learn. There are going to be certain roles where it is important. If you're a PM at a company like Stripe, where their primary product is an API and their user is a developer, yes, you do need to have a technical quote unquote background. about half the PMs I worked with at Stripe did not come from an engineering background. They came from philosophy majors and English majors. And there was actually someone, I think, who had a biotechnology major. It doesn't matter. You go, you learn what are the skills required to do the job, just like any other skills. So that's kind of how I would think about the background question.
Yeah. All right, so we have one more question with a lot of votes. We'll take one, maybe two more from the voting. So talking to customers, this question says, talking to customers is a great approach. How did you ensure you captured a diverse range of perspectives and avoided bias from engaging with a limited group? And I think this goes a little bit to what we talked about of self-selection if you only talk to customers who want to talk to you.
Yeah, I can take a quick stab at this one, Ethan. So I actually think bias from engaging with a limited group is not a bad thing, depending on where your product is in the life cycle. If you are building a brand new product that is 0 to 1 and that did not exist, and this was something that I have done at one point in my career where I literally built on a brand new product that did not exist. At that point, I did not want to hear what the entire planet has to say about that product. It was going to start off in a beta with a very, very specific niche problem that it was solving, which meant that my user set was not the entire TAM that you show on a slide of 8 billion people. It was these 2,000 enterprise customers who are going to use this for a very specific use case. And I only want to hear from that limited group. Once that product grows from that stage, it gets on to the next stage where it's going and growing. And now you have a user base of 10,000 or 100,000 or a million or 100 million. That's where you don't want to kind of limit it to a very selective group. You don't want sampling bias coming in. But I don't think there's a good and bad when it comes to a limited group. It just depends on what stage of the life cycle your product is in and who your target users are. Within your target customer segment, yes, you do want to have a diverse range, but that target segment in itself, especially if you're working on early products, as a lot of people from the initial chat I saw are working on either startups or sort of small AI companies right now, be focused about what you start with. I think at Airbnb, one of the things that Brian always talks about is advice he received from Paul Graham way back when Airbnb was a YC company starting off, is it is better to have 100 customers that absolutely love you than to have 100,000 users that kind of sort of like your product. So make sure that you're focusing on the right set of users.
So fun fact, I was going to talk about that exact same analogy. I heard about it from Emmett Shear, who founded Twitch, who got it from Paul Graham as a YC startup. And he used the number 1,000. But the idea that I think you can think about is there are products that make a lot of money from being liked but not loved. My favorites are in the fast food industry. It's quite difficult to find people who tell you, oh my God, McDonald's or Subway is the best food on earth. So they're working with low cost ubiquity and making money off breadth. And in that case, you really do have to think about how do I appeal to people and get them to choose my product over your product. But for most of the product leaders here, you're looking to create what Kevin Kelly at kk.org called 1,000 true fans. This same idea of a set of people who love what you do. And it's okay if a lot of people don't love what you do, as long as the people who do will pay a lot of money for what you do. And so I would just encourage product managers to think about who is an evangelist for this product, who loves it so much. And that may be all you need. So with that, we're getting on towards the hour. We have one other question, a couple other questions with a few votes here. I'm going to do one more, and then we'll thank everyone. We appreciate all of you. I'm just going to pick one. Give me 1 second. How are you doing? So I think the most interesting question here, sorry, no insult to anybody else, is how do you balance shipping features at a good pace with listening deeply to customers? And also conflicting asks. So it's really, where does customer feedback fit with all the other goals of schedule, revenue, etc.?
Yeah, I see the question from Ravi. That's an interesting one. So there's always going to be conflicting asks. There's always going to be conflicting priorities. One of your key jobs as a product manager, as a leader, as the person who is responsible and accountable for a product is figuring out how you're going to balance these and figuring out which of these are important at what stage in that product lifecycle. So if you are in a competitive race, if you are essentially doing something that where speed and time to market is the most critical sort of factor in the product life cycle, then shipping fast and shipping at a good pace and being iterative about it is probably what you're going to prioritize. That said, you always find a way to listen to your customers. So yes, you have revenue goals. Yes, you have sort of customers asking for certain features. Yes, you have pressure from your leadership to ship at a sort of consistent pace. You need to figure out which of these you are optimizing for based on what metric you're actually trying to move. This is where sort of metrics really help, because each of these are moving a different needle and they're all needles you want to move, but you need to really be clear. And that is where your thought clarity comes in. This is not something that a tool can tell you. This is your thought clarity on which is the needle that I need to move this quarter or this half or this ship cycle. And then you kind of focus on that. Everything else then becomes a distraction. So I think one of the things that we do really well at Airbnb that actually solves for this problem is we have a lot of companies have a one company roadmap, but we truly say that there is only one real product manager at Airbnb, and that's Brian, because he sets the direction for what the company is going to work on. And in any given year, there are exactly 3 priorities that the company is working on, and that is it. So those of you who are familiar with the Airbnb product will see that we have biannual releases, and then there's small stuff that gets incrementally updated throughout the year, but 2 major releases in the year. And every single person at the company is focused towards those goals. And that is something where your leadership is supposed to bring that vision, that clarity, and that alignment for the whole company, because they are the captain of the ship. They're setting the direction. If there is clarity coming from there, then it becomes very easy to say that, hey, I'm hearing all of this from my users, but for this year, that is not the priority because this other thing is the priority, and you focus on that.
So I would add one thing to this. I love the idea of cheap tests. Look, bureaucracy is a real thing. And one of the ways I got a lot of things built was to figure out how to run a test of something, see what the user response was, and then use that as my club to get focus on it, or to learn I had a bad idea. Many things I shipped had order of magnitude different responses. Things I shipped that I thought were small features blew up and made a ton of money. Things I thought were huge home runs ended up being, fine or even bad. The faster you can put out a test, a trial, when you're talking to customers, the faster you can show them a mock-up or a demo. These things will help you sort out what is worth doing and give you the evidence to push them through. And so with that, I think we need to conclude. We really appreciate all of you being here. We can't necessarily connect everyone, but if you follow us on LinkedIn, we'll be happy to share what we write, connect if we can. And so I very much appreciate it. Rohan, anything you want to add before we end the recording and call it a day?
No, just thank you so much, everyone, for not just attending this, but for being so present and engaged. Just the number of comments in the chat that are coming in are just a sort of testament to how deeply engaged people are. There are additional questions that I see even in the chat and on this. So some of these we'll try and address on LinkedIn. I see a couple of questions about book lists and AI tools as well. So we'll try and address those on the more sort of public forum so that it's available to everyone. But appreciate the time that everyone's taken to kind of come and listen to us talk about what we've learned in our careers. We hope that you can actually take some of this and put it into practice. And if you do, drop us a note and let us know what worked, what didn't work. We would love to hear how you went and took some of this into practice.
Absolutely. Strongly agree with that. For anybody who writes on LinkedIn or anywhere else, we love to get feedback of what you're really doing, because it can feel like we're shouting into a vacuum. And so knowing what you actually did and how it worked for you is very rewarding. So with that, Jason, go ahead and wrap up the recording, and we'll wish everyone a good day or good evening wherever you are. Back to work. All right.